Okay, so hello and welcome. So today we are going to be taking a look at what I would recommend you play Baldur's Gate through, at least on your first playthrough, of the classes that I would recommend that you play through it on, okay? Now, this is all predicated on the idea that you, as a first-time player to Baldur's Gate 3, want to actually talk to people in the game as your character. If you don't want to do that, you can throw this guide out, okay? But if you do want to actually talk to people and have a decent chance at, persuading them and doing all this other sort of stuff, you're going to need a pretty decent charisma score, which is why some of these classes are not very good for you as a primary character on your first playthrough if you're not playing multiplayer. Okay? So, getting that out of the way, I'm going to put on your screen a very quick thing. It'll flash. It'll be like, which class, if they have a 1, it's a class that I would recommend that you can play or that you can play. If they have a 1 asterisk, there's something there that you can do, but some of them, might not be the best subclasses there. And then if they have like a 0 or like an X or something other than those, I would recommend that you don't play them, okay? So, with that out of the way, I'm going to change my background to probably the best one here, theoretically, is Soldier. Just because of that, or Entertainer. We will choose Soldier because I like Intimidation. Alright, so, Barbarian. I don't recommend you play this class on your first playthrough. You have a Barbarian in your party that you will get decently early on. And you have to dump a whole bunch of your skills to even be a Barbarian. Okay? You need the skills in this order. You need high dex and you need high strength. You need high strength, high dex, high con if you want to use unarmored defense. Now, you don't have to. But if you didn't and you wanted to use like medium armor, which you can do in this game, you can only get your charisma to 10. It's not very good. On top of that, you also can only choose very certain things. So this human thing, we're going to put on acrobatics because you can pick it in any skill. As a barbarian, you can only pick certain skills that aren't intimidation. Like, so you could theoretically pick intimidation and then none of the other actual good skills to pick deception, intimidation, performance, or persuasion. You only get intimidation. If I pick street urchin, you can see it here. You basically just get intimidation. It's the only one of the 4 primary skills for talking to people that you can take. So, again, I wouldn't recommend it on your first playthrough, especially if you're doing this on Tactician, because this all pertains to being on Tactician mode, rather than any of the other ones, because the other ones, I think, give you slight buffs in your dice rolls, and they're easier DC-wise, okay? Past that, let's move on to the Bard. The Bard, I would recommend as a playthrough on your first playthrough. Please, you can play a Bard. It's so much fun to play a Bard, okay? Even if you pick the Soldier background instead of the Entertainer one, you get Intimidation, okay? And then, as you could clearly see here, if you have that, you can get all of the talking skills just straight off the bat. You can get all of them, which is S+ tier when talking to people in this game, which you're going to be doing a lot of, okay? So just you get all of the good skills to talk to people, okay? And you can even drop one of you can even move your human proficiency one to sleight of hand, okay? As a bard, I believe you actually get all the skills. You can literally choose all of them. So let's do deception and sleight of hand because we saw we could do that. And yeah, it looks like deception, sleight of hand. You can get all of the skills, so you can literally choose every single skill in the game as a bard, which is fantastic. That means you can literally choose all of your skills. So if you wanted to be performance and persuasion, you can do that, and then take like sleight of hand as a background and deception as a background, and then take intimidation as a human. Boopy, you're all good to go. You literally have all of the best skills in the game for talking to people and then opening all of the locks. So that's why I would recommend Bard there, okay? And again, depending on your background, there. They also are a full caster, so that means you get to experiment with magic. And on top of them being amazing to talking to people and being a spellcaster, you can even make them a semi-decent frontliner, maybe not on Tactician. Again, if they're one back from the actual frontline on Tactician, they can be very good with their 2 attacks. They can also be a very good archer as support with sharpshooter. And they can also be just a full spellcaster. They're a great class to play on your first playthrough, and I would recommend it, okay? okay? Next is a Cleric, okay? Also, going over Bard's thing real quick. So their ability score, how you would actually build a Bard, would be you dump everything, and then you get your high charisma, which I didn't go over, and I'm sorry about that. But you can get stupid high charisma so that it buffs all of these stats down here, which makes you very good at talking to people. And you get high dex and high constitution because you can't wear heavy armor or medium armor, and it's all going to be based on your dex for your AC. You can actually get medium armor later in your subclass, so you could theoretically actually have your dexterity at a 14 and then put another skill like wisdom at 12. But that's up to you there, okay? If you want to go like a full light build for full dexterity for full shooting arrows, which if you want to do that, I'd recommend that you bump this up without getting into magic items and such, okay? Now, finally moving on to Cleric. You can play a Cleric on your first playthrough. This has a little asterisk. Why? Life Domain, Nature Domain, Tempest, and War Domain all get heavy armor proficiency. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but it very much is for you. Light, Shadow, and Knowledge can only give you medium armor, and when you do so, when this happens, you can only have your dexterity has to be a 14 to benefit the most from AC, which means that your ability scores. So let's just say we took Knowledge Domain. It would mean our stats would have to be something like this. Let's see. Which means our charisma score, which means talking to people, is not going to be very good. It's just a straight roll. It's no minuses, no pluses, just a straight roll. If you had a medium armor to benefit for the most of this, you'd have to take a dexterity of 14 to get the +2 to your armor on top of medium armor. And then you have a shield, and your constitution always needs to be high, and your wisdom is your primary stat for casting stuff, okay? And depending upon which cleric you do, determines your skills here. Now, you can get persuasion, I think. Now let's see if this transfers over to life. Yes, you can. As a cleric, these are your skills right here that you can take. So we'll move this back up to acrobatics. And I don't think you can actually be a deception cleric, but hey. So these are the skills that you can take, and you can see that of these 4 ones down here, you can take persuasion, which is not amazing. I'll be very honest with you. If you wanted to actually converse with people, which you need to, but this is the highest thing you need to do it with, okay? Now, if you choose, let's say, Life Domain, or Nature, Tempest, or War, you get heavy armor. Now, this benefits you in various ways besides making your AC high. It means you can dump your dexterity, and then you can pump up your charisma to decently good levels and leave everything else bad. This hurts you in a lot of other ways, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Which means your persuasion can be like a 4, okay? And then you can do a background that gives you like athletics and intimidation, and then you could take persuasion, and then if you played as a human, you could get performance, okay? Which would give you 3 of the 4 good abilities that are good talking things that you would need at a decently high skill, okay? Which again makes it a 1 asterisk in my opinion for a class that you should play. So if you want to play cleric, go right ahead as long as you pick one of those 4 subclasses. As long as they're life, nature, tempest, or war, you can perfectly play a cleric and have a pretty good time on your first playthrough with talking to people, okay? Clerics are absolutely vital on tactician mode because they have bless, which is, I don't even think they have this one here. Yeah, okay. So they have this skill called bless that they will eventually unlock. I don't even know where it is. It should be somewhere here. Whatever. They get a skill called bless at like level 2 apparently. It's here. I'm stupid. They get a skill called bless. Come on. Oh my god, I'm making myself look like an idiot now. At some point in the game, they will find bless. Okay, so here it is. For some reason, it's not showing up on life domain clerics, even though I'm literally running a life domain cleric, and you can get bless. I don't know why it's not showing up, but there it is. You can always get bless as a cleric. Bless gets you a 1d4 to attack rolls and saving throws, and you can cast up to 3 creatures. And at level 2 spell slot, that's 4 creatures. You can then, on top of that, get a staff at Act 1 in the Underdark and a tower that I'm not going to spoil. You can get one that basically gives you 2d4s to everyone, and then they also get 2d4, I think it's like 4d4s for spell attacks or something stupid. So that will help you tremendously on Tactician mode. So Cleric's vital, very decently good class to play in your first playthrough, I would say. Next is Druid. They're a little tougher. So the problems with Druid is they don't have heavy armor proficiency, but they have medium armor and shields. Which means that to benefit the most from their AC, you would want a 14 dex, something good con, wisdom, and then like bare minimum, you can put one other skill up to 10, which basically doesn't give you a negative to the roll. However, the problem with druids is that they don't get any, proficiencies in any of the good skills that you need to talk to people. It's sad, but there it is. Which means that even if you boosted your charisma as a actual druid, you can't pick the skills down here needed to talk to people, which is not very good, okay? And again, this is all predicated on them wanting to talk to people. And this one, by the way, is because you're a human, which means it can go into basically any stat. So, but that's the problem with the druid is they can't take any of these down here. So I just wouldn't recommend that you play them on a first playthrough. You actually don't even have one in your party all the way until like Act 2. Maybe even Act 3-ish, but I think Act 2, at the very end of it, you can get a person named Halcyon. This is all I'll say about that. As a druid companion. Otherwise, you just don't have any for the whole game, because druids in this game are not amazing, but they're decent. Next, a fighter. If you want to play a fighter in this game, it is perfectly viable to play a fighter, depending on which fighter you want. You get heavy armor, shields, medium. You basically get all of the proficiencies. If you want to play an archer, you take the archery fighting style for the +2 on all of your attack rolls. I don't know why it's not showing up, but there it is. Yeah, +2 on all ranged attack rolls, okay? So, fighters can get, let's see, they can only get intimidation on their checks for, their proficiency, which makes them not amazing. However, they do have an ace up their sleeve here. If you play a strength fighter, which means you're doing melee build, which means you can dump all of your other stats, theoretically speaking here, and then take like a soldier background, which would leave you with 2 stats that you won't have much to do with. But this would give you a +4 on intimidation, which can be very useful, and you always have a +2 in performance and persuasion. And if you play a human, you could theoretically solve this problem by putting your one skill as a human in persuasion, which would mean that your performance and deception are not very good, but your intimidation and persuasion are pretty decent. Okay, 15 is pretty decent. When you get to level 4, you get an ASI, which means you basically get 2 points. You put 1 into strength, 1 into charisma. That boosts it up by 1, which would make this like a +5. And then intimidation +5, which means you can perfectly get through the game on that, okay? Especially talking to people, you can perfectly get through the game on that, okay? So I would recommend a fighter like that. You could even do the opposite of building a dex fighter. So if you do all archery, so let's say you're going to use bows in the game, you can just do all dex, con, and then charisma. And you can put the +1 in charisma if you wanted to, or you can put it in constitution. I'd recommend constitution just because if you're playing on tactician mode in the very beginning of the game, it's actually pretty hard. But past that, it gets easier. Next, a monk. So, monks in 5e are not very good. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, there are various items that they can get that will improve how good they are. Let's put it that way. Because there's a lot of items that boost their stats in various ways, like they do more damage with their unarmed attacks and all that other stuff, okay? Now, saying that, monks, let's check, because I'm not entirely sure. They can't actually get any of the good skills, okay? Which is pretty bad. actually that's really bad. Because if you took a background and act light, let's just make this 100%. Yes, you cannot choose any of the talking options. So if you wanted to talk to people, no, not really. Is a thing that you can't really do. And as a monk, you basically run a dex build. I don't even think you can run a strength build. Because these are with your fists. I might even be a strength build only. I don't play a monk very often. If you haven't guessed, they're not very good in 5e. But they do actually get access to simple weapons. But they basically punch with their fists. That's how they do everything. Is they punch with their fists. Okay. So let's actually drop these stats down, and I'll tell you if you can actually use a dex build. Yes, you can use a dex build. Can you use a strength build? No, apparently not. So there you go. You need to have high dex if you play a monk. There we go. To actually use your flurry of blows, because you're going to be punching a whole bunch of creatures with your punches or unarmed strikes. But there you go. You can at least theoretically have decent charisma, but I wouldn't, because you also get things based upon your wisdom and all that other stuff. That I'm not going to go into here. You also blah 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 blah. Yeah, wisdom, yeah. Because you're a wisdom character, this is how your character stats are built, theoretically as a monk, and then you have certain things that you're proficient in, but none of them are the talking skills. So, bottom line, I wouldn't recommend a monk for your first playthrough. Paladin. Yes, please play Paladin on your first playthrough. They're very good in 5e, they're very good in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think I need to tell anybody that, okay? The one thing, so they have heavy armor proficiency, which means they can dump their dex. They can have high con, and then they can bump up their charisma to stupid levels, or they can take the constitution, and they get 2 proficiencies in either intimidation or persuasion. So if you did that, okay, then you took a background in, let's say, history, history, persuasion, and then you could take your other 2 things in whatever you wanted. So you could take intimidation and persuasion, which will get you through the vast majority of the game, okay? And then you could take your other one in whatever skill you want, or religion, insight, medicine, or whatever, okay? But as you can see, they're already a +4 down here, and if I drop this and move it here, you can see that they're a +5. And persuasion and intimidation are the vast majority of the checks. Deception can be, if you wanted to, and performance comes up sometimes, okay? It doesn't really matter what subclass you play here. They all basically get the same. They get the same proficiencies, so that's really not going to change there. Besides the color of your cloak, so you can do what you want there. So 100% easily recommend a Paladin playthrough on Tactician mode, especially if you want to play on Tactician mode. Playing a Paladin is like a godsend. Compared to a fighter. It makes the game a lot easier in the first few levels, and then you can just immediately switch over to fighter if you wanted to when you get to like level 5, so you have your extra attack. Then it can make you at least equal there. Next, Ranger. So, Rangers in 5e are not very good. They have been retconned, boosted in so many ways, trying to make them at least decent. However, in this game, if your favorite enemy, if you pick Ranger Knight and you get heavy armor, okay, which it says you do, heavy armor and skill proficiency, and then you have Natural Explorer, which basically means you get a resistance or sleight of hand. I take sleight of hand because you can get another find from it. You can get Scratch, which is a dog, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so if you, let's see, if you take a folk hero, let's see if you have any, nope. So, that answers that question. If you take a ranger, you basically can't get any of the talking skills. And on top of that, your spell casting, because there are a spell casting class, needs to be in wisdom. Okay? So this is a normal build for a, a ranger. You could theoretically strap on heavy armor here, and then dump, you could theoretically strap heavy armor here and then dump your dex and only go strength, but it's just not worth it, honestly. I'll be very honest with you, since you can't really take any of the abilities that would give you the ability to talk to people. Again, talking to people is very important. If you want it in this, first playthrough, obviously. So they can't take the proficiencies needed to do so. So I wouldn't recommend a ranger, and we're not going to spend much more time on that, okay? A rogue. The rogue is one of the characters that might be able to do this. So let's see. Yes, they get skill proficiencies, and then they get expertise. So as a rogue, you basically get all of the skill proficiencies that you could possibly... Yes, you get every single skill. I would recommend you play a rogue. So a best combination of a rogue would probably be, let's see, entertainer, actually, because you get acrobatics and performance. Your ASIs would look something like this. Let's see. We'll make that there. Yeah, so this would be something you would make your rogue with their ASIs like this, which means you would have a decent con, you would have very good dexterity, you would have very decent charisma, okay? Then, because of your background that you chose, which should be probably entertainer, which means that you get acrobatics and you get persuasion, just straight off of the bat. And then you get four proficiencies, which means that you can take persuasion, intimidation, and deception, okay? And then you could take whatever other one you wanted. So let's just say sleight of hand, because that's the other good skill. You get 2 expertise, and then you can actually get more later in the game, way later in the game, mind you, but you can. You can get expertise in sleight of hands, so you can basically be the one that picks all the locks, as I said, that you need one of these people. And then you basically get 1 more expertise, and you can put it in whatever you want. Put it in persuasion, you get a +6, okay? And then let's make it even more stupid. Let's make your charisma 16 instead of your constitution, which means that you have stupidly good skills literally everywhere. So if you wanted to have expertise in performance and persuasion, you have a +7 starting off the bat, which means you're really good at talking to people. Like, extremely good at talking to people. Bards get this feature a little later, but they, again, can choose all of the skills just like you can, which means you're stupidly good at talking to people in the very beginning of the game. Flat out of the bat, or out of the gate, at level 1, you're really, really, really good at talking to people. So it's completely up to you on that, but I would recommend a rogue on your first playthrough. Now, on tactician mode, this might be a little different. On tactician mode, I don't think rogues are very good because they only have 1 attack and they have to use their sneak attack. However, you can build around this, especially on tactician mode. As long as you have an actual other frontliner with you, you can go around it and be an archer build or be a stabby build. There's a ways around it, okay? And you can even theoretically just hide and sneak attack all the enemies to death. That also works in the game, okay? Next, we're going to talk about the Sorcerer. And they are pretty much a class I would also recommend that you can take off the bat, okay? So, what is their Gish thing, Majigger? How you would build a Sorcerer? Without going into the reason you would take a level 1 fighter after this, or you start as a fighter and then multi-class into Sorcerer, we're not getting into that. You get light armor and shields, okay? Your AC is pretty weak, which means you need a decently high dex, theoretically speaking. Constitution. And then your other main stat is your charisma, okay? Which means that you get very good at talking to people. On top of that, since we chose the Acolytes, Insight, and Religion, we can choose all of the good talking skills. Besides the performance one. Again, performance is needed, but as I've already ranked, persuasion is 1, intimidation 2, performance 3, deception 4. Only because people might not use deception on the first playthrough a lot, but they may or may not. If you use it more, it's ranked up higher. But you can get 3 of them, okay? 3 of the skills and not get performance, okay? So that makes them already amazingly good for your first playthrough. On top of you being a spellcaster, which means that you can cast spells like a lot of people want to do on their first playthrough, okay? So that's going to be a very decent choice right there for your Sorcerer. So if I was going to personally play a Sorcerer, how you solve the I don't have the performance thing is you'd be an entertainer, and then you can change your skills around so that you can take persuasion and then intimidation, and if you play a human, you can take deception. And then Babada Boopy, you are all good to go, it looks like. Yeah, so there you go. You have all of the skills needed to talk to people all the time. It's great. And you have the acrobatics thing so you don't get shoved off the map. So that can be your Sorcerer build. So I'd recommend a Sorcerer if you wanted to play them in your first playthrough. A Warlock, I would also recommend you play through. You're going to see a little theme here. The Wizard, we'll get to in a minute. So, Warlocks, again, they're also a Charisma caster, which means that their build is basically the exact same. Now, there is... what is it? There are some different higher level subclasses that get access to medium armor, okay? I know the Fiend, I believe, gets access to medium armor at level 3. Long story short, your dex needs to be pretty high because you're going to be using that to attack with your weapons if you want to be a Hexblade. If you don't want to do that and you want to be a primary spellcaster, it's just Charisma. But this stat block is usually what I would run as a Warlock anyway, okay? Now, what can they take, okay? Now, they can take Deception and Intimidation as their skills, okay? They already, let's see, I think Performance, let's see, Acolyte. And, yes, they only get Deception and Intimidation, which again, if you want to be deceiving people, can be very useful, and intimidating people is very useful, but they don't actually get Persuasion. However, you can fix that. That's actually not that bad of a thing to fix, right? So, if we go to the Acolyte and we choose like a Noble, you have History and Persuasion. Okay? Then, as a Warlock, you can choose Intimidation and Deception. So the only thing you're missing is, again, Persuasion, and if you play a human, Babadaboopy, you now have all 4, and you can talk to everyone. So that can be a build that you could run on your background. It's always up to you, again, on your background, on what you wish to pursue. But, again, these 4 skills you can always take if you play a human and a Warlock, which means you're very good at talking to people. You are a spellcaster that is really, really good in Baldur's Gate 3 because of how short rests work, which means they take 2 seconds to get all of your spells back as a Warlock, instead of a regular 5e game where it would be a bit, which means you can cast like 6 fireballs a day and blow everyone up, and it's great. Past that, there's just a good class in this game, so there you go. Warlock, I'd recommend as a first playthrough if you wanted to do so. Okay, the Wizard. So, without getting too much into it, we're going to check very first of all. The answer is no. I wouldn't recommend them. Why? They can't get any of the talking skills. And on top of that, if you're building a regular wizard and not multi-classing into fighter at level 1, which I'll get into later, you're going to need high dex, you're going to need high con, you're going to need high intelligence. Intelligence is your spells, okay? You're going to need a high intelligence for your spells, okay? And which means all of your other skills have to be in things that are not talking to people, which means you're going to suck really bad on tactician mode especially. You're going to suck really bad at talking to people. That's just how it works. So I just wouldn't recommend a wizard. They're also probably the most complicated class for a new player to understand because of how their spells work with ritual casting and writing the spell scrolls into their spell book and then preparing their spells, okay? I just wouldn't recommend them for a first playthrough. They can't talk to people, and they're really actually a pretty complicated class, okay? So, the last thing here, I'll flash up on the screen. Again, if they have a 1 on them, I would recommend that you play them. If they have a 1 asterisk, please go to that part of the video. I'll have the chapters down there, and go look at what I said there. I would recommend them, but there are some asterisks on subclasses, basically, on what I would do. If they have, like, a 0, or they're crossed out, or something of that description, I would not recommend them for you to play on a first playthrough because they are either terrible at talking to people, and they don't have the ASIs basically required to talk to people. And as a first playthrough, you're probably going to be talking to people a lot, okay? So, but that shouldn't be that many classes, I'll be honest with you, all right? Hope you guys found this video entertaining, helpful at least. Hopefully it helps someone on their journey through Baldur's Gate 3, at least their first playthrough, maybe their second playthrough, okay? Other than that, I'll put the big guide videos up there for your character creation in case you want to go back and look at those. Otherwise, I'll be making some actual in-depth discussions about each class and specifically their subclasses a bit later, if you guys want that, all right? Other than that, please have a nice day. Hope this helped you guys. I'll see you next time.